So what if you could make a memorial that is actually more about information, and that you're never fixed and it can go wherever it wants to go? And everyone who's donated to it, they could use it, they could host it, they could share it.
For quite a great deal of time, I mean, she was hired in 2005. She struggled with finding the correct and appropriate visual expression.
It was a bench at one point, it was a darkened room at another point, but the theme always was a theme of how do we call people's attention to the issue of species extinction.
We can, and many museum exhibits do make long, detailed displays about species declines and the biology of birds and so on. And that's very useful for lots of purposes, but I think it's also important to try to pull at the strings inside people.
Missing is not just about specific extinct or endangered species. It's about absence, and it's about a more fundamental level of not knowing what we're losing, and that we need to link species loss to habitat loss and really focus as much on the habitat.
Of course, the overall mission of the Academy has to do with two really fundamental and important questions. One of which is the nature of life. How did we get here? And the second is the challenge of sustainability. If we're here, how are we going to find a way to stay? And these questions resonated very strongly with Maya.
On average, a species disappears every 20 minutes. This is the only media work that I've done. I might never do another one because I'm not a media artist per se, but I've used the medium because it seemed to be the one that could allow me to convey the sounds and the images here. Memorials to me are different from artworks. They are artistic, but memorials have a function.
It's a beautiful sculptural object made from bronze and lined with recycled redwood from water tanks in Clear Lake. And that is the sculptural form that gives expression to Maya's project. If you think about a cone or a bullhorn, they're used to get the attention of a crowd, often to communicate an important message. This project has a very important message, and it's about our Earth and what we're losing and what we're missing and what we don't even know is gone.
So what is missing is starting with an idea of loss. But in a funny way, the shape of this cone is, whether you want to call it like the megaphone, the RCA Victor dog, it's listen to the earth. And what if we could create a portal that could look at the past, the present, and the future?
You can change what is in missing by changing the software, by changing what is projected in missing. And so missing isn't a static installation. It's an installation that's going to grow and change over time. And she has worked to bring all of this information together from laboratory after laboratory, including, fortunately, our great group of researchers here at the California Academy, into what has become missing.
This art couldn't have been more site-specific to this place. And we also think just visually, in terms of its sculptural form, it really holds its own against the architectural largesse and grandeur of the Renzo Piano building. It's an unusual, compelling object. We think it'll draw people out onto the terrace. They'll see this big cone and say, "What is that?" And then as they approach the cone, they'll hear these very unusual sounds that were obtained from the Cornell Ornithology Lab.
We have the world's largest repository of natural sound recordings of birds and mammals and frogs and insects, and also a huge library of videos. And so this was an absolutely perfect opportunity for us to team up with a world-renowned, very creative, inspirational artist and put the sounds and sights of the animals that we study into a brand new context, a context that really allows people to appreciate in an aesthetic and thoughtful way the idea that we might live in a world without these sounds or without these beautiful sights.
In the scientific realm, it's called shifting baselines, where we just keep getting used to less and less diminished expectations of what it was. And when I came across the passage of lobsters 6 feet long, oysters that were 12 inches that came out of New York Harbor, that within 3 days, all of the oyster beds in New York, Manhattan, the harbor, would clean the water. And so just getting people to wake up to what was just literally there 200 years ago, 150 years ago.
You see this object, you say, what is that? You come out, you hear these intriguing sounds like I've never heard in my life. And then you step closer and you almost have a very intimate experience.
We could link to different institutions around the globe, maybe one per continent, maybe 2 or 3 in this country, and then once they're all networked, they begin to communicate with one another and share information. In 2010, the website will launch, but it will be what you would call an informational website, and then we're going to try to, by 2011, invite people to add a memory. So in a funny way, the memorial grows, and there's something organic about how this memorial begins to have legs, so to speak. So we don't know quite where it'll go, but I promise to keep on it for 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. My goal is to raise awareness and then either protect forests from being cut down or reforest in ways that promote biodiversity.
Biodiversity is often argued to be important for the world's human populations because of all the medicinal plants and the uses that we can put to it and the fiber that it gives us and the food that it gives us. And while these are vital and important and they're worth literally hundreds of billions of dollars, the part that we also have to be able to communicate is the more spiritual sense of how important it is that we get to live side by side with all of these forms that have 3 billion years of history behind them, and how tragic it would be, not commercially and not in a utilitarian way, but in an emotional, psychological, spiritual way if we watch them one by one disappear.
This is really, it's sort of a merger between art and science and advocacy in a funny way, getting people to wake up and realize what's going on. And in that sense, it's very much a memorial, and it's trying to get us to understand and interpret history and to look at the past. And to me, the memorials have always been about looking at the past so that we proceed forward and maybe we don't commit the same mistakes.